Hello and welcome to Artifacts, the monthly cable show on arts in Minneapolis. I'm excited to have a guest with us in this show named Jack Vees. I had first seen some music that he had composed a few months ago at the Walker Arts Center, and he's been in town recently with more of his music and graciously consented to be a guest. And he's got some interesting things to say. So Jack, thank you very much for being with us.
Oh, thanks for having me.
Great. Now, as I mentioned, I first saw some of your work at the Walker Arts Center in September of '91, and you've recently been back doing something else.
Right.
Can you tell us a little bit about what you've been doing here in Minneapolis?
I came back this time to perform one of my own pieces on a Minnesota Composers Forum concert, and it was for electric guitar. I'm mainly a bass player, but I will occasionally, if it's my own stuff, play guitar on it because I'm too bad to play anybody else's.
Oh, okay.
stuff. No, bass player I'm good. Guitar player, like, I know my limits. Anyway, I played on my own piece. It was for electric guitar and harpsichord.
Okay. Well, we're going to both see some of the stuff that you've been involved in and composed, and talk more about some of the specific motivations and some things that have inspired some of the things that you've talked about in your music. But I want to start with might be an ignorant question from my point of view. I've seen the term new music used to describe the kinds of things you do and other composers. They're very interesting stuff, but is that a meaningful term?
It's a really bad term. It's sort of like modernism and postmodernism. Like, if you really think about what that word means, it's useless.
Sure.
So new music, yeah, it could be Prince's new album. It could be, some odd avant-garde stuff. It just lets you know that, oh, it happened within the past, whatever new means to you.
Okay.
Past couple months, past couple years.
Now, amongst the other hats that you wear, you're a teacher.
Yeah.
And you're co-director of a center out at Yale, as I understand it.
Yeah.
But when you're describing what it is you're teaching or what your students are working on, or if you're going to get a concert together, what would you use? What kind of term would you use to describe what you're teaching or studying or performing?
That's probably three different things.
Depending on what you're doing.
What I'm teaching is music technology, how to be able to be self-sufficient. Buy yourself a Macintosh or personal computer, hook it up to MIDI, be able to get real-time feedback on what it is, what kind of sounds you're making. If you're not making the kind of sounds you want to make, you hear it right away, change it, rather than being dependent on some sort of like big mainframe. And I'm all for this disbursement of technology. Take it home with you.
You mentioned a certain theory you've got that you like to describe.
Oh yeah, the Armada theory.
The Armada theory,
of technology, in that a lot of the big institutions, whether they're academic or state or whatever, the big mainframe systems, they require you to put in a lot of time, a really long learning curve, to figure out how to get it to do the simplest things. And even when you are good at it, I had a friend at Princeton who was working on their mainframe computer, maybe 6 or 7 years ago. And he would type in a bunch of numbers that, at least he told me, he knew what it was going to sound like when it came out. And I think the more you do that kind of thing, you have a feel for, generally in the ballpark, what that sound is going to be like. But you don't hear it right then. You have to go across, or he would have to pedal across town. He would pump the numbers in, go across town to where the mainframe was, pick up his tape. Once it was processed, he might even have to wait overnight if there were other jobs ahead of his. Pedal back across town with the tape now, pop it in the tape recorder, and hear 2 seconds of like bleep, tweak, etc. And when you've invested all that much time in it, I think people fool themselves very often. Like, I've invested all this, I better like it. I'm going to like this car that I bought.
So they're kind of driven by the technology a little bit more than necessarily what they're thinking.
The tail's wagging the dog. And,
right.
So what I like about a slightly more, it's not really low tech, it's small tech, and that you can sit there and tweak something and immediately hear, oh, I don't like that, rather than having all this emotional investment in it.
Right, and work it then if you need to change it or get it back to what you thought you were trying to do in the first place.
Exactly. Yeah.
Great, and that's part of the Armada theory.
Yeah, the big ships, whether they're the mainframe computers or orchestras or whatever, they're big and they're powerful, but they don't turn really fast.
That's right.
And there's all these smaller ships, small computers and small ensembles around that can be pretty mobile.
So this music, which I think a lot of folks are maybe have heard of, or this field, this part of the musical field, is in some ways maybe getting more democratized as the technology gets.
Yeah. The technology is getting democratized.
Yeah, the technology is. So more people have access to the technology.
Yeah, in other words, you don't have to stay around the school you went to in order to maintain access to the equipment.
Right.
I've seen a lot of really good composers and video artists. You know, they'll take a job at the 7-Eleven, you know, from midnight till 8 a.m. so that they can be in the same town with this equipment.
Near the mother machine,
Yeah.
because there isn't one back
Wherever else
home
in-
or in
yeah.
another part of the country or something.
Yeah.
Where did you get your training?
Well, my master's degree was at Cal Arts. That's where a lot of this odd stuff started happening. My undergraduate school was, you know, fairly straight ahead.
Now, I believe you brought a tape. I know you brought a tape, but
Yeah.
I believe it
That
takes
was
place
done, that was done at Cal Arts.
at Cal Arts.
Yeah.
And I think in just a moment we're going to get a chance to see a couple minutes of that.
Yeah.
Could you tell us a little bit about Cal Arts and how it got started? Because that's interesting.
Yeah, yeah.
And then what it is we're about to see, and we'll see it in just a moment.
All right. Well, Cal Arts is an interdisciplinary school for the arts. It was founded by the Disney Foundation back in the 60s. I don't think they knew what they were getting themselves into when they started this, because a lot of non-Disney-like product has come out of it. But it's a school. It's all under one roof, but it's a big roof. And there's a school for music, one for dance, one for theater, one for film and animation, and one for stage production. And so you're constantly, every time you go down the hallway, you're tripping over a choreographer or bumping into a filmmaker who wants a soundtrack. And this was, I think, really good, because most other schools, you know, the dance department is in some other building, maybe even across town. You never have the
Lot of-
opportunity. You
lot of
have to work hard.
cross-fertilization then.
Right. In these other situations, you would have to work hard to work with a choreographer
Right.
or filmmaker.
So-
Here,
yeah.
it's not that it's required, but it just normal practice.
It's the natural part of it. Now, describe for us what it is we're going to be seeing here. This is a particular concert.
Yeah. Well, actually, it wasn't a concert. It was a video production.
Okay.
I worked with a film and video class to make this piece. Although this piece does occur as a live concert presentation, and that's actually one of the things that will be on in January when I come back.
Back here in
Yeah,
Minneapolis.
we'll do this piece live. It's what I like to call a percussion sports piece. Maybe before we go into
Shall
the
we-
details of why it is a percussion sports piece, we'll take a look at it. But this grew out of just being around Cal Arts and working with filmmakers wanting to work with a composer, and saying, look, we have this time on Friday morning, Friday afternoon. Can you bring something in that we can make a video of? And I had this sort of quasi new music theater piece that I had put together.
Okay.
That was a response to a couple of things, but it's set up almost like a TV wrestling match.
This sounds interesting. Let's take a look at it now, and then we'll talk about it in
Okay.
a second. This is at Cal Arts, Jack Vees piece.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the latest performance of Players. Today we have for you what promises to be a very exciting match. Two of the most talented and dynamic players in the league going head-to-head in a grudge rematch. Wearing red and black today, number 41, a young but a very, very talented player, very enthusiastic. From Tupperware Flats, Missouri, Amy Knowles. In the copper and blue, a veteran many years in the league, a favorite of many of the players here, from Super Bowl, Maryland, number 33, M.B. Gordy. As you recall, when these two players last met, it was quite a show they gave the audience. When the mallets and muscles finally stopped flying, it was Gordy that had won the piece 5-4 in a very controversial and hotly contested decision. Let's take a moment now to explain just briefly what we'll be seeing here today during the game. Both players will be moving back and forth between their large orchestral chimes and the individual percussion setups they have. The players have to keep their chimes ringing at all times during the piece. If a player's chimes are called dead by a referee, who today is Rand Steiger from New York, a foul will be called on the player, and if the player gets 5 fouls during the course of the game, he's lost the match. Now, Amy and MB will be choosing to play from a number of different boxes they have on scores in front of them. Let's take a look at a sample box and see what a veteran player like Gordy might do in interpreting that box. Notice how Gordy reads the box from the top to the bottom, each marking indicating a location generally from left to right within the percussion setup. After a player finishes a box, he has the choice of going on to another box or going back to the individual, to his orchestral chime to keep that going. The important thing to remember is that they've got to keep those chimes going at all times during the piece. If a chime goes dead, a foul is called on the player, 5 fouls on a player, and they've lost the match. Well, it looks like the crowd is certainly ready, and the contestants are about ready to go. Let's let the players play.
Well, that was a lot of fun. I've seen that a couple of times, and I had a lot of fun just watching it. Looks like it was a lot of fun to do.
Yeah, the audience in that clip was not primed for that at all.
So this wasn't cold. It was cold. They were seeing it for the first time. And
right. The only explanation they got was what we saw the commentator do at the beginning.
Right.
All I did, this was a Friday afternoon shoot. On Thursday, I went up, on the various bulletin boards around the school and put my little 8.5 by 11 Xerox, come to my video tomorrow. I need an audience, free beer and bean dip. And this is
brought 'em in.
Yeah, this is what you get.
And you're reprising this, in a sense, next month at Intermediate Arts.
Right.
Okay,
Right.
and that's, we might as well mention Intermediate Arts in their gallery downtown Minneapolis.
Right.
On North 1st Avenue, I forget the exact address, but
Between
400
4th and
block.
5th, yeah.
Yeah, right across from the Wyman building.
Yeah.
The warehouse
Yeah.
district, that's great. You had mentioned to me earlier that part of your motivation for this was coming from your perception of opera. Can you talk about that?
For every piece that either I write or pieces that I like that other people write, I like to see that there's a reason for it being other than just, well, here's another sonic knick-knack. I like it to make me think about something. And I like to make myself think about stuff when I'm piecing this together. And two of the things that made me come up with this piece, well, the big one was the whole idea of drama in opera. I'm not being anti-opera, it's just that the way that the drama and music go together, they're sort of like running in parallel. And I just wanted to come up with a different way to make these two things fit, rather than gluing them or lashing them together, to have some kind of tension in the music happening because of the music itself, rather than because of a storyline that we're hearing about as the opera goes on, running parallel to it. So the whole idea of having a piece that you don't know how it's going to end. We didn't know that day when it was performed who was going to foul the most, who would win the piece. And every time we've played the piece, that's the way it goes. We don't know where we're going to end up at the end of the piece. It may be 3 minutes long, it may be 4 minutes long. I don't think it could go for longer than 10 minutes, just because the way it's structured is it gets more and more difficult as they get further into it. So
It looked like a certain amount of intensity there.
Yeah.
And the audience was into it too. I noticed the ref was getting...
The ref, no matter who plays the ref, always gets it, because the idea of a chime fading out, that's a hard thing to call.
It's a judgment call.
I mean, yeah, if it was just a meter or something that goes below a certain point, then I think that takes some of the drama out of it.
Sure.
The drama is, you as an audience member probably will disagree with the referee a majority of the times. And I remember by the end of that shoot, he was covered with popcorn and bean dip.
Lucky guy.
Yeah.
Jack, we're going to take a break and be right back to talk a little bit more about your music and what's going on with it. But first, we like to always in the middle of our show have a little interesting factoid about the arts in Minneapolis. So stay tuned, we'll be right back. Welcome back. We're still talking with Jack Vees, who's a composer and a musician, and he's been here in the Twin Cities a number of times in the last part of 1991 with an event coming up next month, January, at Intermediate Arts, downtown Minneapolis. And Jack, something...
Super Bowl weekend.
That very weekend?
Yeah.
Okay.
So we're doing sports pieces on Super Bowl weekend.
Oh, excellent move. Excellent move. Maybe that's a cross-marketing thing there. You get a few
It may turn out that way.
sports fans from Southern California to come and see your show and forget about whoever's in the bowl. A piece that I had seen, Saints Before the Vanishing Point. This was a piece that was done by Zeitgeist at the Walker in September. And I noticed in the notes that part of what you're talking about there was the notion of the solo, the performer's solo within a piece. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Well, okay, the idea for that piece was I had not incorporated any kind of improvisation into my pieces for maybe 7 or 8 years. No particular reason why, I just hadn't come up with a good idea for it because I wasn't interested in just hearing someone improvise again. I wanted to think about improvisation. So I built a piece that each of the solos had something to say about the way that person was bringing himself out of the texture of the piece, rather than have the standard setup where the ensemble, the rest of the band, plays some kind of background material and you as the soloist strut to the front and do this mind-blowing solo that we're all going to love. I wanted to set up sort of a game, again, it was a sort of a game piece. Not a game like in the percussion sports thing, but a game where the materials that are there for the solo, the player has to fool with those materials more rather than just come out and improv for us. We get to see his mental processes of picking up the pieces of the piece that had already happened and to work with them and to structure them into his solo. So we have more of an idea of his or her mental workings than just, oh, well, I'm going to be an improviser standing out in front again. The foreground, background thing is a lot different.
And you give them an opportunity in this piece, and I'm guessing other pieces you work on too. What I like about what I've seen of your work, and as you've described, is you're really pushing those boundaries from kind of a linear or a two-dimensional means of expression into giving the performers, the audience, as well as the composers.
And it may have a lot to do with just the environment that we're all in. Like, you know, seeing films and just being in a mass media society. I think you can't just write chamber music anymore because the chambers that we live in are different.
Now, you've personally, you've been in, I think, rock bands, you've done jazz, obviously this music. Any thoughts about some interesting intersections that are sort of on the horizon or coming up for us?
Well, I mean, I think it was interesting when we came back this time, you said, you know, Jack Vees, composer, musician. That's sort of I know that people think that way because maybe for the past 60 years or so, composers have not necessarily been musicians. Whereas before that, they were much more involved with the hands-on stuff, like actually playing it. I think we're seeing a return to that nowadays. Like a lot of the work that I enjoy, that I see other people doing, the composers don't have this hierarchical thing where they're this person up in a room and they're you know sweating and with the pen, and they're getting down there, they're pushing the sleeves back and actually playing the stuff again. Again, it's this biofeedback, like having what I was saying before about computer music in the past years. There was a really long time before you got to hear what it sounded like. Well, I think composers went through a period where they were too tied to the paper and they didn't actually hear what it sounded like, all the concepts. And I'm all for that. Now, to have a piece be about something rather than just more, another sonic knick-knack that you have
technique
in your environment. But to maintain contact with your materials, get down in there and do it. Play in your own bands. I'm seeing more and more composers start their own, maybe they're bands, maybe they're new music ensembles. I don't know what you would call them at this point in time.
But putting it together.
And staying with it all the way through. Taking it on the road.
Taking it on the road. And I'm glad you're here in Minneapolis. Thanks. Now, January, do you know the date you'll be at?
Yes. The concerts are the 24th and 25th.
Okay.
Friday, Saturday nights.
Okay, Intermediate Arts downtown.
Yeah.
Jack Vees, thanks an awful lot
for
spending time with us. Appreciate it a lot.
See you.
Well, and now there's the part of the show that we call the Artifacts Question. And last month we asked a question that we weren't sure if anybody get right, and lo and behold, they did. We had 3 responses to the question: what eminent Midwest communications company got its start on the Minneapolis riverfront specifically in the Washburn-Crosby Mill. And I believe we're going to hear 3 correct answers right now.
I think the answer to the question about the eminent communications company is Midwest Communications, WCCO, Washburn Crosby Company. My name's Valerie Golden. My number.
Thank you, Valerie. And we had yet another correct answer.
Wouldn't the answer be WCCO Radio or Midwest Communication Systems Incorporated? My name is Ed Phill.
Thank you, Ed. I believe that was Ed Phill, a former city council member of a few years back. And the last correct answer.
Answer to the artifacts question is WCCO, and my name is Ron Korsch.
And thank you, Ron. Now, all of those lucky, I shouldn't say lucky, they were skilled. They knew what the answer was. They'll be receiving this beautiful downtown Minneapolis art and architecture walking tour map with a major value attached to it. And that's a prize that any of you are going to be able to receive if you get the right answer to this month's artifacts question. And on the screen, you'll be seeing the question. And this month, the question is, in September, Lois Holton received a special recognition award from the city of Minneapolis. Her Nutcracker fantasy was a sellout from 1964 to 1986. Now here's the question. In what year did she found the Minnesota Dance Theater and School? Now you can call in with your guesses or your answers to the Artifacts hotline, and that number is 673-2234. So you can also call in if you have any questions about the conversation we had with Jack Vees or anything that you think you've heard about here on Artifacts. 673-2234. Thank you for tuning in, and stay tuned for a short mini calendar of events, and you'll see us next time.